You know, the very first NFL season was a crazy time. You had 14 teams get together and form a league of organized professional football for the first time in history, and nobody knew what was going to go on. But there was some great fireworks at the end. Join me as I dive into a crazy hypothetical and try to figure out what would have happened if the Akron Pros, the champions of the first NFL season, would have played just one more game in Chicago, and what may have happened to change the course of history. It's all coming up in just a moment here on the Pigskin Dispatch.
This is the Pigskin Daily History Dispatch, a podcast that covers the anniversaries of American football events throughout history. Your host, Darren Hayes, is podcasting from America's North Shore to bring you the memories of the gridiron, one day at a time.
Hello, my football friends. This is Darren Hayes at PigskinDispatch.com. Happy New Year. Welcome once again to the Pigpen, your portal to positive football history. And boy, do we have an exciting series that we're going to kick off here for your 2025. It is a what-if series where we're going to go back and look at pieces of history that had some very interesting items and events happening in football history. And how could they have been changed just by one play or one player or one game? And could have changed the course of football history forever. We're going to get into one of those tonight. The very first season of the National Football League. Before it was called the National Football League, it was the American Professional Football Association, the APFA. And in 1920, that's the group that was formed when the 12 bodies got together and met in Ralph Hayes' showroom on September 17, 1920, and it spurned into this first APFA season. APFA for 2 years. Third year, it was called the National Football League with a name change. So we had, just a great season that transpired then, and you ended up having a total of 14 teams that joined the APFA. There was one that only played one game. I know, not really part of it, but they're in the standings. But the Akron Pros of Akron, Ohio, ended up being the the APFA champions of 1920, the first NFL champions are considered. And they faced a number of challenges during their 1920 season. With only 11 games on their schedule, they didn't have as many opportunities to prove themselves as some of their rival teams did. This may have been through design. Back in those early days of pro football, the schedule was not laid out prior to the season. It was unveiled almost daily, week by week. Teams were just throwing games together and, calling somebody up or telegram a letter and saying, hey, you want to play this Friday? Okay, we'll meet you wherever at a certain time, and our two teams will play. That was a rough and tumble game back in the early days of pro football in the APFA in 1920s. Now, the Akron 11 had to compete against powerhouses like the Decatur Staleys, Canton Bulldogs, and the Rock Island Independents. And the teams had more experience and more talent. On top of that, the pros were dealing with some internal issues like player disputes and financial struggles. And it's a wonder they were able to achieve as much as they did given the circumstances. But despite these challenges, the pros still managed to put together a respectable season. They finished with an 8-0-3 record. Ties didn't count in the standings. Remember, the NFL did not have a championship game. It was the team with the best win-loss record, win percentage per se, at the end of the season as determined, and it went to a vote at the owners' meetings that winter, a few months after the season had completed. So it really wasn't super organized, but college football wasn't organized till just recently to come up with a national champion. So the NFL, it took them a good 13 years to finally figure out, hey, we got to play a championship game to do a title. But those first dozen years, the 2 years of the APFA, 10 years of the NFL, they had to figure it out by the team with the best record. And they didn't have preset schedules, everybody playing the same amount of games like we said. Now, they did at the Akron Pros have a lot of unknowns, but there were some pretty good players on that teams too. Fritz Pollard, the pioneering African-American player and coach, who would go on to become a Hall of Famer, and Paul Robeson, a talented end, who would go on to have a successful NFL career himself. These two men, minority players, really played a major part in the success of the Akron Pros. Now, the 1920 season was pivotal one for the APFA, which was really trying to establish itself. This was sort of a laughing stock of the college game, looking at this bunch of professionals being put together and they were really being scoffed at. You had men like Amos Alonzo Stagg and Bob Zupke and even Walter Camp sort of denouncing professional players and the professional game, saying the college game was the pure sport of men playing without pay, just playing for the love of the game. And that really held true, and it really held a lot of weight because the college game was much more popular than this fledgling NFL APFA thing that was coming about. Now, the Canton Bulldogs were led by the president of the league, the face of the franchise, the face of the league, Jim Thorpe, who played for the Bulldogs that first year, and here's some of the biggest names of the sport. On a Decatur Staleys, who would eventually become the Chicago Bears a couple years later, they were already starting to establish themselves as powerhouses. The APFA was a league that was still finding its way, but already producing some amazing talent, and the Akron Pros were right in the thick of it, competing against the best teams and the players. Now, that record, which you see here up on your screen, has the finishing of the APFA season. The Akron Pros at 8-0-3. The Decatur Staleys finished at 10-1-2, a 909 percentage. Buffalo All-Americans were 9-1-1. And the Chicago Cardinals and Rock Island Independence and Dayton Triangles all finished with respectable records with 2 losses on their 2 ties and 5 or 6 wins each. And Rochester Jeffersons were right behind them at 6-3-2. And Canton was 7-4-2, played a few more games, but they were right in the thick of things also. Well, it came down to, there was a game that was supposed to be played on the season for Akron, ended on December 12th with a scoreless tie in Decatur to seal that season. They ended up playing, the Akron Pros did the Decatur Staleys and the Buffalo All-Americans in their last 2 games, and it really sort of determined what was going to happen on there. So December 5th, they played the Buffalo All-Americans at Buffalo, and then December 12th, 7 days later, they traveled to Decatur, Illinois to play the Decatur Staleys. These are 2 teams that they're in direct competition with, which was kind of a thing that really happened a lot here in the early NFL, and we went through that quite a bit. The game with the Decatur Staleys was kind of interesting. We're right down to the end when Dutch Sterneman missed a field goal from the 15-yard line, and it ended up in a tie game. And that's what, sort of got the Akron Pros over, with not having a loss. But Sterneman nails that field goal from the 15 right at the end of the game. We're talking, 7-1 Akron Pros team and a 11-1 and 1 Decatur Staleys team. It sort of flips the script there a little bit. And it puts the Buffalo All-Americans back into the play too, because now they're 9-1-1. So kind of an interesting thing. So what if Sterneman would have nailed that kick? Even more interesting was that there were talks that there would be one more additional game between Decatur and Akron, played in Chicago the following week on the 19th. It could have had a huge impact on the pro season. So let's assume the season ended the games ended like they did. The Akron after December 12th and Decatur, they tie. So those records like you see. But then they have one more game coming up on. So, it could have been extremely interesting, given Decatur one more chance to prove themselves against the top tier opponents and potentially upset that balance of the APFA. Who knows? Maybe the Decatur Staleys would have won the championship, or with their win, maybe that would have pushed Buffalo to become the champions. It's impossible to say for sure, but one thing is for certain: that game would have had a huge impact on the Pros' legacy and on the early days of professional football. But it didn't, and it ended the way it did, with the Akron Pros with a perfect record of 8-0, ties didn't count, and having that season there where they were voted as the champions of the American Professional Football Association at a meeting convened in February of 1921, chosen as the champions. That's your little piece of football history and a what-if scenario that gives you a little bit of insight how football was run at the pro level back over 100 years ago. Hope you enjoyed this little bit of football history. Hope you have a very happy new year, and hope you enjoy this series as we go through. We have lots of things coming up this year for year 2025, not only our what-ifs, but we're going to talk more about our books that have come out. If you haven't had a chance to take a look at them, we have the world's greatest pro gridiron team, the 1903 Franklin, Pennsylvania All-Stars that had a tremendous season, and we pinned them as the world's greatest professional gridiron team ever. Check that out. Also, recently we had When Greasy Met the Wonder Coach. It's a story of the two teams that met in the 1922 Rose Bowl. The Greasy Neal led Washington Jefferson Presidents, and the Andy Smith led Cal Wonder teams of the Cal Golden Bears. Just a tremendous story with two great coaches, two awesome teams, and a fabulous Rose Bowl game, one of the greatest in history. Hope you check that out. And we have a really exciting book that's coming out this year, 2025, that I can't wait to share with you. We're going to hold that little secret in our back pocket here, because I think you're really going to enjoy that. There's going to be some really big news coming up here in the next few months. So hope you enjoyed this. Check us out for some more great football history, our YouTube channel, our podcast, and on pigskindispatch.com, where we have football history every single day. Till next time, everybody, have a great gridiron day.
That's all the football history we have today, folks. Join us back tomorrow for more of your football history. We invite you to check out our website, pigskindispatch.com, not only to see the daily football history, but to experience positive football with our many articles on the good people of the game, as well as our own football comic strip, Cleat Marks Comics. Pigskindispatch.com is also on social media outlets, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and don't forget the Pigskin Dispatch YouTube channel to get all of your positive football news and history. Special thanks to the talents of Mike and Gene Monroe, as well as Jason Neff for letting us use their music during our podcast.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.